1, 2, 3, 4, 1.
Are we rolling? Should I still look, this side of camera?
Okay, so should I say my name?
A few years ago, I got together with my uncle every weekend for several months. We would chronicle his life from basically day one all the way to the present moment. As I was growing up, I would always hear these extravagant stories from him. He'd lived so many lives. Jokingly, we called him the real-life Renaissance man. But yeah, there was a particular story that always struck me about his time working with the King of Jordan, which sounds so unbelievable and crazy. But as a kid, I'm hearing palaces and kings and wars, and it's like a fantasy world come to life. So hearing it from somebody I deeply cared about just was revolutionary. He built a new world for me with that. And when I started this project, it was admittedly aimless. I really had no idea what I was doing or where I was going with it. I just had this gut feeling that it was something I needed to document. And so a month ago, my uncle suffered from a stroke, which severely affected his speech. It's very difficult for him to effectively communicate now. His words are slurred. He can't make cohesive sentences the way he used to. And I just sat there and thought that there's really no worse tragedy to befall a storyteller like him. And so now more than ever, I'm so grateful that I used this time a few years ago, even though it wasn't organized or thought through. I somehow knew I was going to need it, and this is exactly what I needed it for.
And one day I get a phone call from an old friend, back chapters now in this career story, Najib Halaby. So Jeeb, when I first met him, was administrator of the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration. He was in the cabinet with John Kennedy, President Kennedy. Went from FAA to Pan Am. He got pushed out, and so Halaby was retired, young man. 3 people gave him seed money to start a company called Halaby International Company, HICO, we called it. Halaby was probably one of the most prominent of the Middle East, American of Middle East descent, and still close to them because it had helped Saudi Arabia, it helped Iran, and the Shah, and other nations. And so go over, they said, and open up some opportunities and we'll invest, get them things going and we'll invest in you. So he said, come aboard as a consultant to me, to HICO. We got a lot of connections, but my reputation has to be restored. Then King Hussein of Jordan, who was relatively young at that point, I guess he was 3rd in the office of king of this new country. Small, probably the size of Indiana, roughly. 3 million people live there. Many of them were refugees out of Palestine after the Palestine-Israel war. Beautiful little country, but landlocked, so had no oil and no access to the sea. So the king decides, he's a very smart guy, he decides aviation, he was a pilot himself, aviation is the key to the future. Halaby comes back and tells me about it. And we're going to sign on to build this airline. And so we did. We became partners in this effort. And I set up all of the North American and then beyond marketing programs and promotions and positioning. They were the fastest growing airline in the world for 2 years, on the covers of magazines, everything. So one of the ideas that Halaby had, he was a very creative thinker. So he did something called Mecca Con. The Middle East Civil Aviation Conference, MECACon, a conference for technology transfer and know-how transfer from America, US, because we were so advanced in aviation. So I became the conference organizer. He became the sort of the missionary, getting people on board. In October, I had just a few months to put this together. In October '77, we held the first conference in Amman, Jordan, under the sponsorship of King Hussein. So he could be the patron, but he didn't have any money. We had to raise our own money. About 250 people came from 32 nations, and we had 3 days of really fantastic meetings. That night we had a big dinner, and the Iranian delegation approaches us and said, this was still the Shah of Iran, the king of kings, they called him. There was a revolution building. They approached and said, the Shah would like you to come to Tehran and do this next year, MECACon '78. So, okay. Halabi went back to, and I went back to the US, put some plans together, and I flew to Tehran and began putting the conference together for the following year. I was commuting to Iran as the country is going down into an armed civil war. So I'm going back and forth with Iran. Each trip becomes a little bit more frightening, I think. Meantime, as I put the conference together, the man on the moon, Neil Armstrong, agrees to be the keynote speaker. And a whole list of people coming to speak. And they're all getting very nervous. So the last trip out, I take along a young man who joined me, I don't know, a couple of months earlier, and this is his first trip out of the country, Al-Madunya. This is on final inspection. So we land in Tehran, and my friend at Irane, who was my liaison, picks me up in an armored car. And as I come off the plane, I look out, and there are U.S. Air Force freighter aircraft unloading weaponry, 2 of them, and all kinds of helicopters in markings of the Iranian Royal Air Force are loading up with bombs to go downtown to blow people up. And Al is like, where am I? You know, so they drive us out to a brand new Sheraton that I had arranged for the conference headquarters up on a hill above the city. It's just open, and there's no one there. They've all escaped. So the hotel manager, she says, Sabak is coming up to speak to you. Secret police for the Shah. So they come in to talk about protection. So they said, we plan to give you a tank. I said, what do I do with the tank? Well, the rebels, they called them, will want to kidnap people and hold them hostage. So the tank will sit out front with a machine gun up top, you know, sitting the guy up top. And if the mob comes up the hill, they'll mow them down. Okay? So we're there a couple of days, you know, planning, doing everything, and I'm like the second day I'm hearing boom, boom, downtown, you know, tanks firing, helicopters dropping bombs. So I called my friend Ali Gandour, the chairman of the airline in Amman, Jordan, and I tell him where I am, and he said, what are you doing there? I said, Ali, next week at the conference, and you're a speaker. I'm not going there. No one's going there. The country's going down. They're at war. Oh my God. I said, well, I got to get out. Well, he shouldn't be there in the first place. He said, but I have a jet. The aircraft can't come into Tehran because it's a war zone. Get down to the shores of the Gulf, and I'll pick you up. There's an airport down there. Well, that's through the enemy territory, 300 miles. So I said, no way. Finally, my friend Tehrani got me on a Greek airline. And so Al and I fly from Tehran to Athens, get another aircraft back to Amman, and the 747 back to New York. 22 hours of flying. I go to Halaby's office and I tell him, oh, he's very upset. Sunday night I get a call, and the guy reads me a statement that the conference has been indefinitely postponed by the Shah. And 1 week later, the Shah left, escaped. That was it, the country fell. So I got out on time, I guess. At the beginning of the year, Halaby's daughter shows up in the office in New York, Lisa Halaby, 24 years old, a graduate of Princeton, first women's class of Princeton. It was all male before that, architect major. And so Lisa is signed up for the Columbia School of Journalism master program, like in September. And she needs something from like March on. So she says, I'd like to go to Jordan and help. So I talked to the father, and the father says, no way, I convinced him. He said, you and your wife will be responsible for overseeing her. Thanks a lot, guy. She said, I don't. She begins working with Ali Gondour, the chairman of the airline, and his people that we're working with. And she meets the king, King Hussein. King had married a few times, had a bunch of children. And he was married to a woman who had been an airline stewardess. She was a Palestinian. And she became sort of like his ambassador to the country. And she and a few other people went out to a hospital in the desert. And as they were coming back, a dust storm came and the helicopter crashed and she died. So he was really heartbroken. And he's coming out of this mourning and he meets Lisa. Beautiful young American, Halaby's daughter, Arab background, Arab American background, Princeton grad, architect, helping the airline. So I come back and it's about, I don't know, 10 o'clock at night and she's not there. Now this is very unusual. A single American girl in the city after dark, unaccompanied, this is like, doesn't happen. So now I'm getting a little panicked because I'm figuring, you know, Halaby sort of gave me instructions to take care of her, look out for her. I hear a car up front, look out. I was in the office, I look out and I see Lisa coming up with a guy I knew from my work with the king. He worked for the king. So I opened the door and the guy's like, oh my God, you know, now the secret's out, I guess, or something, you know. And he, you know, and he scoots off. And she comes in, and we sit down and talk for a few hours. And she tells me, oh, the king, blah, 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 he's a great guy, you know, so, oh, okay. So on my next trip to Tehran, I have 3 or 4 days, and this war fever is going on, and I'm leaving to fly back. And I'm in the hotel, and I've got an afternoon flight. And I'm reading the newspaper. I look and it says, King Hussein to wed. I flip it. Lisa Halaby, daughter of, oh my God, they, you know, the news is out. It wasn't official, but somehow the news got out. I gotta get out of here. I said, I gotta get back to New York. So I do. I try to check out. I go out to the airport. I get a run there, and we're flying. And the stewardess comes and says, Mr. Borney, you're wanted in the cockpit. So I go up and I go into the cockpit and they close the door. The pilots are flying. Halaby is on the Air Inc. He says, Hank, where are you? I said, well, sir, somewhere over the North Atlantic. I said, meet me at JFK tonight. Stay there. When you land, stay there. I'm going out to the Middle East. I said, I think I saw the news. Well, it's not official yet, he said. I have to give my permission. I'm going out tonight. And then he says, what do they owe us, meaning money, because there were slow payers. Tell your wife to meet us at the airport with the books. The three of us sit down, and Marianne goes through all the numbers. He takes the list out, because he's going to tell the king, you can't marry my daughter unless you pay all those bills. He flies out. 2 days out, my telex, a message is coming in. A message from the royal palace appointing me as the representative of the family for the media, and the announcement of the engagement of King Hussein and Lisa Halaby, and she'd become queen. Her name now is Queen Noor al-Hussein. Noor being the light of Hussein. Immediately my phone lights up. People calling from everywhere, wanting details. And around the world, so I had like an 18-hour day. And that was like a week of me positioning this not as some, American gold digger marries a rich king, because he wasn't rich. And she was not a gold digger. They really were in love with each other. So I get a phone call. Be ready to travel tomorrow. The wedding's on. Look, okay. Put a bulletin out for the media so they know. I go out to the airport. So now, when I went to Jordan a lot, I would land at the airport and get a taxi and go to the hotel or wherever I was going. And it was a very safe place. Now we land with this official party, and there's a line of Mercedes lined up along with military escorts, and each of us have a guard with an AK-47. So I'm feeling very unsafe because I could wander around. Now I'm a target. So we have the whole top floor of the Intercontinental Hotel. They had cleaned everybody out. We go over to the Queen Mother's palace, and there's a lot of people, local people there. And we go into the palace, and they're all just sitting around. And there's a little room, and the guy in Arabic is going through whatever the wedding ceremony language was, quickly, not long. Boom, it's over. Then we go out into the garden. They're taking pictures. All of the media are there. I had just been there two weeks before. I wanted to get back, so I had tickets out of Beirut back to take me home, because the Royal Jordanian 747 to New York was only 2 days a week, and I didn't want to wait all that time. So I'm ready to go in the morning, and the civil war breaks out again in Lebanon. All the roads are shut down. Oh, shit, I'm going to be here a long time. So we have a little dinner party. The king and queen leave, and I'm sitting next to Mrs. Cy Vance. Well, think about it, the Secretary of State's wife. As we're having dinner, I hear her say to the Secret Service guy, what time do we leave? And he says, 9 o'clock, if that's all right. I said, where are you going? She said, back to the U.S., but I'm stopping in London. I said, can I ride with you? So they had the Air Force jet. So she said, if it's okay with them. So I asked the Secret Service, oh, of course, we know who you are, okay. Be out there at 9 o'clock. Okay, in the morning. Dinner's over, I go to bed in the hotel. All of a sudden, there's pounding on the door. Oh, what the hell is that? Like, 1 in the morning. I open the door, and there's a bunch of guys there. The guys taking photographs out in the thing. We can't get out. There's no planes out. We can't go to Beirut. They shut the highways down. We understand you're going to Kennedy. I said, yeah. Take our film. So I got all these bags of film, Wire Service, People Magazine, Time Magazine, they're all, labeled. I got bags of film. What do I do with these? you're going to be met at Kennedy Airport. Okay. I take them with me, you know, out with my luggage. I go out, we get in, and just the two of us. And we chat. We land, and she says, I'm going to see friends for the weekend in the countryside of England. They'll take care of you. Oh, your limousine is waiting. Really? I look at a guy in uniform and a Jaguar, a high-end Jaguar sedan. Get in the car, wham, he takes off. He's going down the highway 90 miles an hour. I get to the airport. He drives right through to the airplane. Everybody's looking out the window because they're holding the aircraft for me. I'm now like 20 minutes late, 25 minutes late. So I got to get out and take all the bags of film and everything. And they were all looking like, who's this guy? Who's this guy? And it had a first-class seat hold for me. So it's nice to have friends. Up I go, and I sit, and I fall asleep, and I, you know, over the Atlantic again. I crisscrossed the Atlantic so many times. I get to Kennedy, and immigration guy comes on with a guard and says, looking for me. Borner, Borner. I said, here I am. Okay, everybody else wait. They're waiting for you. Who's waiting for me? All the media. So I get all the bags. I come off, and they had signs up. Borner, Borner, they're all the, so it's, okay, Time Magazine, here. AP, here. People, here. And about 8 bags of film. And they all rush off, and then I go home and go to bed. Jet lag again. I can say I did a royal wedding. Really, really exciting. But a lot was going on in those days, and Halaby, who had a lot of mysterious connections, was in Beirut one day at the American Embassy and leaves and goes somewhere, and they blow up the embassy. Really blow up the embassy. The whole thing collapses, trying to kill him, the word was. And a lot of people died. The last time Halaby and I were together in Tehran, in Iran, we were hosted at dinner by the head of Iran Air, General Ali Khatami, and somebody knocks on his door at home. He opens the door and they machine gun him. So we were losing people that we were working with over there. There's a lot of unrest in the Middle East. So the Khomeini people, the fundamentalists, have taken over the government of Iran. The Shah has escaped. They tell me I'm a marked man because of my relationship with the Shah and the king. We really shouldn't come back. It would not be good to come back. Well, I kind of ignored it, made a few more trips, but I became a little bit uneasy. But spring '83, we were done. My great Middle East adventures were over.
I've learned so many lessons from my uncle, not least of which is that contentment doesn't necessarily mean stagnation. There's this part of our interviews that I always return to where he talks about being easily bored and easily distracted. You know, whenever he was at a company that sort of settled down, that he reined into this stagnation, he would have this itch to run, to find the next adventure, on to the next thing. It was always whatever was next. And I'm so glad to see that aspect of his personality sort of unconsciously becoming a part of my own lifestyle. This idea of living curiously. And I don't think I'd be the same person without that. So, thank you, Uncle Hank, for all the stories, all the lessons, all the laughs, all the conversations that felt like warm hugs for the soul, for bringing the world into focus for me. Thank you.